Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Stephanie Sandala. I'm Programming Outreach Specialist at Library Link NJ. I'm so thrilled to have you join us for our second event in our summer book bash, a conversation with Ben Clanton, Chou Musser, and Jenny Holm, and our lovely moderator, as always, Christy Chadwick. She will introduce our authors and get us started. Thanks, Christy. And I see applause in the chat already.
Yay, thank you.
Yes.
And it's great to see everybody again this week. And Stephanie, thanks again for having me. I am Christy Chadwick, and I am the director of the Ballston Community Public Library in Burnt Hills, New York. You don't need to talk about me. We're going to talk about our authors instead. And let's start with Ben Clanton, who is the New York Times bestselling author and illustrator of the Narwhal and Jelly series, picture books like Moe's Mustache, Vote for Me, Rot the Cutest World, and Rex Rexit. Chou Musser grew up in a mixed race Chinese American family in Oregon, where he was homeschooled. And today he freelances as a picture bookmaker and motion graphics designer from atop a cozy hill in Seattle, although that's not the cozy hill he's on right now. And then Jennifer Holm is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling children's author, recipient of 3 Newbery honors for her novels Our Only May Amelia, Penny from Heaven, and Turtle in Paradise, and has collaborated with her brother Matthew Holm on several graphic novel series, including Baby Mouse, Sunny, and the Squish series. So thank you so much for all joining us today. I am going to just start you off right now. Now, most of you are author illustrators. Jenny, do you illustrate at all, or is it just your brother?
He does all the heavy lifting.
He does all the heavy lifting. Okay, so as an author, as an illustrator, when did you really start your love for creating art and stories in your life? Jenny, let's start with you.
Okay, so I started out writing historical fiction in my early 20s, and my first book, Our Only May Amelia, was inspired by my Finnish American family's history. Yes, we're a bunch of Finns, and so then I kept working on historical fiction inspired by family stories, and eventually I teamed up with a family member, my baby brother Matt. I was living in Brooklyn. Actually, no, I was living in New York City, and he had just graduated from college, and he came and crashed in my studio apartment, which was probably about 400 square feet, and lived there for 3 months. And we found out that we got along really well. And because he's 6 years younger than me, so we didn't see each other a lot growing up. We didn't go to the same school or anything. And he'd always been a budding cartoonist, and I was his biggest fan. And we came up with the idea for Baby Mouse, and the rest is history.
Wonderful. And I think that being able to work with your baby brother is a big deal, especially being able to say you're his biggest fan. Andy, how about you?
Yeah, I think I've always been interested in writing and illustrating. Growing up homeschooled, we went to the library a lot. My best friend's mom was a children's book librarian in my hometown, Newberg, Oregon. So we spent a lot of time there. Yeah, and then I ended up going to a college that had a emphasis in children's book illustration, and so it was always something that I was really interested in. And then, yeah, joined SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and then, yeah, slowly worked my way into it. Now I make books with Ben, and then I also collaborate with my older sister Amy. We made the book Search for a Giant Squid and make books on my own.
Great, thanks, Andy. Ben.
I had mixed feelings about books as a kid. I loved the pictures and ones that had lots of pictures. Words were a struggle for me. Till, a well-known series called Harry Potter came along, and my mom was reading those aloud to me and helped open up that door of longer sort of literature for me. I still prefer to be read aloud to, lots of audiobooks. It didn't occur to me that I could make books myself until I was in college, and I was volunteering in an elementary school library and reading books with the students there. And I was enjoying them just as much, if not more, than the kids I was reading them with. And found myself going, I wonder if I could make a book. What would that look like? And started carrying a sketchbook around with me and doodling up ideas. And for the next 4 years of college, I'd be doing more of that than even focusing on what I was supposed to be studying, um, with the hope of eventually making books.
Excellent. We're going to talk a little bit between Andy and Ben about their collaboration. But first, when you work with another creator, how much contact and input do you actually have? Most of you have worked with other people besides the people who are here. And do you have a preference between working with others or working solo, even if you haven't actually done that? Ben, why don't we start with you?
I've been doing a lot of collaborating recently, which I know we'll dive into more with Andy and then our friend Corey too. Um, but previous to that, I've illustrated a number of books that I didn't write, um, which is a fun challenge to come out from that angle. Especially like a couple of the ones I ended up doing were illustrating Laurie Berkner songs, and so needing to figure out what the like story arc was. A lot of that needed to happen through the illustrations, which still gave me a lot of them voice and figuring out that narrative. Um, I illustrate a series Jasper John Dooley, but there's typically not a lot of back and forth between author and illustrator. But I feel like we've got a group here today where that's probably a bit of an exception with the people we work with on a regular basis. There tends to be a fair bit of back and forth. I'm curious for how that was with Baby Mouse, especially.
Well, then let's ask Jenny. Go ahead.
So I can honestly say we didn't know what we were getting into. So, Baby Mouse came out in 2005 and we sold it in 2003. And they wanted 4 books to come out in the first year, which at first we were very excited about until we actually realized how much work it was going to be. Because I came from advertising. And Matt actually was working at Hearst Magazines. He was an editor at Country Living Magazine. So we both come from pretty artistic industries. And the biggest issue was Random House had never published a graphic novel before. There was no pipeline for a book longer than 42 pages. It just didn't exist, an art pipeline. But we were really lucky. Our art director at Random House was a very famous art director. She's since retired, named Kathy Goldsmith, and she was Dr. Seuss's art director. And she was also incredibly into tech. So between her and our editor, we figured out a way to work together. So basically, the team is just Matt and I. So usually, in picture books, you don't have a lot of chit-chatting with the illustrator. The illustrator really runs the show. But I had to pitch in and help Matt. So the way we work is I write the manuscripts using what's called a storyboard. Now, a storyboard is what they use in advertising to film television commercials or in feature films. And I was familiar with this because I was a TV producer at Ogilvy and Mather. So I worked on really exciting stuff like Huggies baby diapers and, Tagamet for your heartburn. But basically, a storyboard just breaks out the narration, the action, and the dialogue. So I'll write the storyboard, we'll revise it. Matt will take a pass at it. Our editor will take another pass at it. And when everybody's happy, then he starts sketching. So we kind of use a film model because that's what I was used to. He'll just generate a lot of what we call thumbnail sketches, which are just quick little pencil sketches on a little notepad. And he'll give me all kinds of camera angles and different perspectives of the character. And then he'll scan all that art and send it to me. And I'll actually lay out the book. So for every 2-page layout, I do it in a very old-fashioned, clunky way. I just set up my dining room table with pencil and paper and sticky glue and scissors. And I cut the art out and I lay it out. And then I draw the cells. And then I scan that art, send it back to Matt. And he does the final version digitally on a Cintiq computer using a Wacom drawing tablet. So that's how we work together.
I love the idea of laying the whole thing out on your dining room table because it feels like a lot of illustration now is like all digital and everybody's using tablets and everything. Although last week we had someone who worked with mixed media, so that was different. And I love the classic sound of it. Andy, how about you?
Yeah, let's see. Up until now, I have kind of done atypical sort of collaborations. I guess much like Jenny and Ben have been talking, well, mainly Jenny, and then has been talking about it like working with my sister and then and working with Ben, like both collaborators that I chose, and we worked systems out. And I just signed on for a project with Philomel, which will be like my first proper illustration project that someone else has written, and I'm giving them manuscript. And I think I won't have much contact with the author. Um, yeah, and so since we're going to talk about my collaboration with Ben in a bit, I guess the other collaboration to talk about is with my sister, Amy Cito Forrester, and she's a children's librarian and has been for over 10 years. And she got into children's books, into writing books because she was going to ALA conferences and talking to publishers and saying, like, at the library, kids come in and they're asking for certain types of books. And she was really focusing on like early readers, or beginning readers, sort of that space where kids like first, second, third grade, like learning to read on their own, and seeing like a real gap there. And so she talked to a lot of publishers, and finally one was like, well, why don't you just write those books yourself? And so she's like, well, why don't I write those books myself? And I was like, no, that's not how it works. I've been trying to do this for a while. And she's like, well, why don't we give this a try? So we started writing down some different ideas. And she had this idea that I thought was really fascinating of taking a kind of like choose your own adventure style format, but making it like highly illustrated, like a picture book, and then layering in, like having it all based on like actual science. And so that's how we came up with the idea for Search for a Giant Squid, which is the first book in the Science Explorer series. And yeah, Chronicle books wanted to like took it on and helped us make it. And our process was very similar to what Jenny described. Amy and I, we wrote the book together. So we would like work on the manuscript together, and then we would lay it out in a like very similar kind of storyboard way. And we used a lot of Google Docs, like Google Slides, for creating like the sketch version of it. Because at the time, my sister lived in Denver. Now she lives in Eugene, Oregon. So we've never lived in the same state when we've been writing together. And also just with Google Docs, we could write manuscripts together and edit them. And it's pretty fun. I don't know if you've ever collaborated with Google Docs or like cloud-based uh, like collaboration apps like that. If you're on at the same time, you can be editing the same sentence at the same time. So it feels pretty magical. Yeah, and so we like work that way up until the point that we have a pretty tight dummy with all the text kind of laid out and sketches put into it. And then once we get greenlit for the illustrations, then I'll take that over on my end, and I use an iPad Pro with Procreate to finish all the illustrations.
Wonderful. Thank you. So let's do some solo questions. Ben, I'm going to start with you. So you've stated, as I read on your website, that you drew Narwhal about 4 years before the first story was published. So have your illustrations always come first to inspire the stories you've done?
Definitely the characters are the part that comes first for me. For me, it matters less if they show up visually first or if it's just something that's kind of like a character living in my head. Although I guess it takes on a visual element no matter what, no matter if it's on paper or in my head. But getting to know that character over time, who they are, is a big part of that process for me. So Narwhal, I started drawing because I was inspired by photography of Paul Nicklin. And just seeing these gorgeous images of actual narwhals, which I knew like nothing about. limited to the movie Elf up until that point. I became captivated and I started doodling this narwhal creature all the time. And I think one of the things that ended up working into the drawings a lot of the time was the feelings I had towards narwhals. There's this kind of like positivity about them and kind of this fantasticness, like anything was possible. Because that's the feeling I get with the actual creature. Like they seem too fantastic for this world, and yet they're real. And I think that worked its way into who Narwhal is, as well as then some inspiration from waiting in line for ice cream and waffle cones, and has a sugar-based personality. But yeah, I'll spend often years getting to know a character, doodling them, asking them questions. I like to tell kids there's two main ingredients for me, characters and questions. And with those two things, everything else can be figured out.
That's terrific. Thank you. Well, we said we were going to talk about your collaboration. So Ben and Andy, how did the two of you get started working together on Plouffe? And also, what made you decide to collaborate on Papilio with Corey Tabor? Why don't you go ahead and start, Andy, with some of that?
Yeah, so Ben and I have known each other for a pretty long time, over 10 years now. I think we met at a children's book conference, maybe in 2009 or around there. And then, yeah, we were living on the West Coast and we would see each other at events. And then Ben invited me into a critique group that he was in. And we were in the critique group for over 5 years. And then COVID happened. And around that time, I think we were both on the same wavelength where we both were thinking we had like some similar stories and we were appreciating each other's feedback. And we were like, what would happen if we tried to collaborate on a project together?
All right, Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Plouffe then?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found, we both had our heads in the clouds with a few of the different story ideas we'd had. There's some other overlapping ones. We had a story about a hermit crab at one point we were working on, and then we've had many starts, which was part of just the fun of it, especially entering the pandemic. When we entered our collaboration, even though we were in the same city, we were doing a lot of it on just like Google Docs, where we'd hang out talking with each other and writing on the same Google Doc, working on one place while the other person's on another spot at the manuscript, and going back over each other's things. And it's just a lot of fun. It was a nice connection to be able to have. And I think that sort of connection worked its way into who Plouffe is, and that character was creating that connection. Is then we wanted to put that into this character and how they respond and interact with the reader.
Yeah, definitely.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I think like Ben was saying, when we laid out when we got together, we were thinking about different ways we could collaborate. And we thought, what if we took all of our unfinished stories and kind of like put them in a big pot together, and then looked at them and thought about like where were our overlaps. And so one of the overlaps was in the kind of Venn diagram of stories was clouds and cloud stories. And then Ben had this really great interactive story called Gloop. And Gloop wasn't a cloud at all. Gloop was like an alien, but it was like an interactive story. And I had this little character called Little Cloud, who was this like very emotional character who was trying to keep up with the bigger clouds and going about its day. And so we thought, like, what if we put these stories together? And at the same time, we were thinking a lot about social emotional learning, especially because kids, obviously during the pandemic were school was very different and their interactions were very different. And then we were thinking about when the day would come that things would become more, normal again. Like, what would that look like, and what would that be like for kids? And so we thought that all the social emotional skills like mindfulness and um, oh, I'm blanking on some social emotional things. Um, Mindfulness and patience and um, all these different skills of just like interacting um, might be skills that kids kind of have to relearn a little bit again. So we imagined for the first book in Plouffe like a play date with the reader to kind of make those social emotional skills just really fun.
And now you've added a third person, and you have this book coming out that, from what I saw from the description, you're each taking like a period of this. I think is it of moth or butterfly?
It's butterfly.
Butterfly.
Yeah.
So you're each taking like a certain time period for it and working together. So how did that come together for the three of you?
I think Andy and I were just enjoying working together so much. And this was when we were working on the first Plouffe book. There's going to be three. The second one's coming out this fall. But when we were still just like working on the beginning of the final art for the first book, we're like, hey, what about Corey? We should do something with him too. See what would happen if we did that. And Corey had this great idea for what if we told a story in stages, and mentioning that a butterfly could work really well for that. And so I ended up doing the caterpillar section. Corey has chrysalis, and then Andy has butterfly. And between each, we did a brief little kind of transition as our character Papillia goes through metamorphosis. So goes through a change, not just of who's writing it, but also then the look and the style of it. So the voice continues to shift. But I feel like our sensibilities were all kind of on the same page. And so it works. It's a very different project than I could have ever imagined. And one of the thrilling things about collaborating with other people is the chance to make something you wouldn't have ever thought of on your own.
Definitely. And when we collaborated on Plouffe, we thought it would be a really fun challenge to merge our styles as much as possible. And we wrote it together and illustrated it together. And we just thought it would be so fascinating to find those places that we overlapped and just lean into creating this really kind of seamless thing where you couldn't see where one of us started and where the other one ended. And when we collaborated with Corey and Corey came up with that idea of kind of separating the sections, we thought it would be really fun to go in the opposite direction and lean into the elements of our styles that made us unique, and that we would each write and illustrate our own sections independently, but also kind of discuss them so that there's overall arc for our character, where the character's having the same story, but just going through these transitions and having these like smaller sort of kind of episodes in between, but all relating into the same sort of like overall arc.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, Andy, from what you've described, a lot of the books you've worked on are really focused on nature and science and those topics. So has that been something that you've enjoyed yourself since you were a child, or does it just seem to happen to be what you end up doing work on?
Mm. Yeah, no, when I was a kid, I was not into nature or science at all. I think maybe because my dad was a gardener at first profession, and my mom, um, she has a master's in environmental education. So they were very much like science, nature, trying to get me to hike, trying to get me to garden. Um, when I go for walks with my dad, he'll tell me all the Latin names of all the plants. And I used to get so angry because like a 1 mile hike would take 2 hours. And then it wasn't until I think I was in my like mid to late 20s that I sort of had this switch where I had spent so much time working indoors. And similar to Jenny, I used to work in advertising. I did something a little bit different. I did motion graphics. So I would like animate commercials and just spend hours and hours indoors. And then, that started going outdoors and loving it. And yeah, so now I just want to now nature and being outdoors is something I really love. And I know so little about science. And I find it completely fascinating. And that's one great thing about like doing a Science Explorer series or doing Papilio. I feel like I'm a good maybe ambassador for kids since I know so little about science. I can be sort of in the same place as they are when approaching it and finding a way to kind of like communicate it.
Great, thanks. Jenny, we haven't forgotten about you, I swear.
I'm good. I'm just chilling.
But you told us from the beginning you started in historical fiction, and one of the things I noted is that your books have so many varied settings. You know, Full of Beans was during the Great Depression. The Lion of Mars was a Mars settlement. Baby Mouse in the Sunny series, you're in middle school. So what kind of research have you done while you've been writing these different locales?
I mean, for the historical fiction book, those were a lot easier to research. I usually dive bomb into the town. I'm gonna have the setting and spend a lot of time with the archivist at the Historical Society and just crawl through the archives for, weeks. I find I actually get some of my for Turtle in Paradise and Full of Beans, I got some of the best research from actually talking to elderly people who had lived during the Great Depression. They've all since passed away, but I had a lot of firsthand accounts of what Key West was like when they were kids, and they were very colorful. But for the Lion of Mars, it takes place in the future, and I wanted it to be grounded in pretty hard science. I wanted it to be like a realistic Mars experience. So we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I talked to, NASA scientists, people at SpaceX. I joined the Mars Society, which is like, it's kind of like SCBWI meets NASA. Basically, it's Mars enthusiasts come from all around the world for a conference every year. And, everybody from scientists who are creating ways to raise algae in space to the guys who are building the actual habitat. And I think I was really, my ideas of living on Mars are kind of based on, the old Mars books that my elder brothers used to read, and you have this picture of Mars with a big old glass bubble on the surface of the planet with like palm trees inside. And but it was really interesting doing the research. When I started talking to people, specifically like the engineers, I was really quickly disabused of the fact that we're going to be shooting people up into space who are, just astronauts, and they're going to live like on the surface. Because I think what we're going to need first are people that can build things and, do electricity and unclog a toilet. So like really basic things. So that was really fascinating to me. And they were also helpful. One of the doctors I consulted with, like a pediatrician, a NASA pediatrician, and he was really great. And he was up, I think he's up on the International Space Station now. So, I mean, when you're enthusiastic about a topic, people who work in it usually are really helpful.
So you're saying that middle school has not been so easy for research.
Well, I mean, the Sunny series has been a blast. I mean, Sunny is not me, but I definitely wanted to take a trip down memory lane of my 70s childhood. 70s was the best time to grow up. I'm taking that to my grave. And just like remembering all the funny little things, pet rocks and plaid pants and kids sitting in the front seat of a station wagon with no seatbelt on. And, just that was the reality of life. So that was really fun.
Awesome. And you've talked a little bit already about it, but tell us a little bit more about working with your brother on Baby Mouse.
Matt. So we don't live near each other either, which is really funny. We sold Baby Mouse, and then our spouses we were both living in New York, and promptly moved us into different parts of the country. So it's been a completely virtual collaboration. It's pretty, the Baby Mouse collaboration is fairly easy, and everybody wants to know if we fight. And so we are 2 of 5 kids. So I'm the middle child. I have 4 brothers. So We don't really fight because we just didn't know each other growing up. We never fought growing up. He was so much younger than me. He was like the kid in the playpen in the kitchen that everybody like that I ignored basically. But I think what has really helped us was having worked in industry as creatives. So we are very good at taking critique. So if I feel something's not working, he understands. If he says this joke is really not working, I don't get all upset because when I was working in advertising, your ideas get shot down, every second, every minute, every hour. So you had to learn to take critique well.
I just want to remind our attendees that if you have questions for our creators here, feel free to throw them into chat because we will definitely have time to share them. So all of you all of your works are for children. Has anybody wanted to write for adults, or do you always feel like you're going to write for children? That's what you want to do, and that's where you're going to stay. Jenny, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I'm hanging with the kids. I do have a manuscript that I wrote about 21 years ago now, an adult kind of romance. It's terrible, so I'm never gonna revise it. It's really quite bad. So, oh well.
Andy, how about you?
Oh, I think I'm with Jenny that I'm going to stick with kids. I think maybe the oldest I might go into is YA. Every once in a while, like a hankering, like I'll have a more elaborate idea, but when I start writing things down, they usually turn into something for a younger audience, and yeah, that's I think my wheelhouse.
How about you, Ben?
I definitely dove into writing and illustrating first with child audience in mind. And as I've done it more and more, it's just like making what resonates for me and what I feel like writing and illustrating. So it doesn't feel like I'm necessarily writing for a particular age group even. With certain notable exceptions, like Ploof, we definitely had like a very firm idea of who our audience was for that. But like Narwhal and Jelly, I don't have this is for this set age. When I go to make those, I'm just having fun spending time with those characters, not thinking about a particular age group. I listen to a lot of fantasy and sci-fi. So I'd love to dip my toes into doing some more sci-fi and fantasy at some point too. And where that would fit age-wise, I have no idea. I'll just have to kind of see where those characters would take me.
All right. So Andy and Ben, you both said that you'd be willing to show us a little bit in your illustrative mode. So I am going to, give you some time right now, whichever one of you wants to start off, whether showing or drawing or however you're going to do it. All right, Andy already just jumped into his view, so we're going to start with him.
Oh, what if I'd love to do something with Ben, if you're game Ben.
Yeah,
Once he comes back, I think he disappeared for his sketchbook.
Okay. Let's see. Ben, what do you think? Should we do something together?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Maybe what have you got going on in your sketchbook?
This is just one of my more recent ones. Usually some sea creatures involved, some monsters, often dragons.
Excellent. What if we did like a mix-a-mole? We could take suggestions from the chat, maybe.
All right, chat
Yeah.
attendees, why don't you throw some animals,
Oh,
creatures out, and let's see what our illustrators can bring to us.
Jenny,
that
do
would
you
be
want
perfect.
to start?
Boss around these illustrators. That's what I do. Why don't you do some like it's back to school time. Maybe do something back to schooly.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah. Does anyone have an animal that maybe we could use for inspiration for the head of our character? Oh, okay. I might have to bring up some reference for that. Anteater.
Here, that's great.
Maybe I'll go with
Anteater. I
anteater.
saw
And
the axolotl. I was diving right in on that one.
you should do the axolotl. I'll do the anteater over here.
And maybe how are they feeling? Because it's their first day of school. Are they nervous? Are they excited? Is their backpack just bursting with so much stuff?
Mm. Yeah, I definitely am feeling the anxiety myself. So that's a familiar feeling. Definitely put that into this one.
Do they have a new hat?
Yeah, wearing their new outfit. Let's see here. I'm gonna add in some
I
of
like that.
unicorn into the mix here too.
Let's see, what else do we have? We have baby stingrays
Oh,
and a
maybe.
unicorn.
Specifically baby. I need to look up baby stingrays apparently.
Well, you need a little dialogue too.
Yes, definitely.
That axolotl is cute. Oh.
Gonna add
Yeah,
some
it's
little
adorable.
I like the anteater unicorn going here.
Thanks.
It's kind of a fitting mix. I never thought of an anteater with unicorn, but I think that works.
works.
I'm gonna have to look up these baby stingrays right now, see what they're about. Bring up some reference on another screen.
Unicorn axolotl.
Yes, with chicken legs, of course. Not that anyone had suggested it. Jane, do you have an idea of what the character is thinking about?
I think the character is like maybe for the axolotl, like where is Mrs. Mrs. somebody's classroom? Like where is Mrs. What's like a short last? Where's Mrs. Smith's class? Maybe the anteater says, I hope there aren't any ants at school.
I liked it. It would really be a bummer to eat a classmate.
Yeah, exactly.
I think my character forgot their backpack too.
Oh no.
Where's my backpack? Oh, I like all the anxiety. It'd be a bummer if you. Cute. Very cute.
My mind on a page.
Oh yeah, forgot lunch maybe. I forgot my lunch. Where's my lunch?
In the backpack.
Yes.
Oh, I like the skateboard, Andy.
Yeah, yeah.
Very cute.
Oh,
There's
I love it,
something
Ben.
nicely incongruous about like jetting along on the skateboard while seeming so anxious. Like totally at their ease and yet totally not at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, you've got a back to school book now. You need to call
There we go.
Chronicle.
I think the skateboard came from I've been watching the Olympics. I don't know how many of you have been watching the Olympics, but just watched the I think it was like the one where they're in it looks like an empty swimming pool and they were doing tricks and it was pretty
Cool.
fun.
I'd read that the youngest Olympian this year is in skateboarding, she's like 12.
What?
That sounds right. They're all so young. I would believe a 12-year-old would be competing.
She was born during the London Olympics.
Wow. What have you got going on there, Ben?
Oh, I just started doodling a pear and now it has big bunny ears.
I love it.
But maybe it should just stay on some sort of topic. It's at the Olympics, it's got swimsuit on here. It's taking some deep breaths before it goes for the world record.
I'm loving the little underwears. Maybe it's a swimsuit.
Yes. It's like the high diving competition from
Yeah.
last night.
Do you all have a particular event that you always are sure to catch with the Olympics?
I have missed, the only thing I've seen this year was just the replay of that Turkish guy who like just put his hand in his pocket and won or got the medal in the shooting competition because he looked so calm, and his competitor was wearing like all this eye gear. It's pretty funny.
Oh, yeah. He said that he didn't need all the fancy stuff.
Yeah, he just seems like the chillest.
Yeah, he just like when everyone, had
Oh, the
all
pommel
sorts
horse
of
guy.
crazy.
Yes, actually, I'm obsessed with him too. The pommel horse guy. He actually,
Yeah.
I heard he was at Penn State, and that's where Matt went to college. And I grew up in
Oh,
Pennsylvania, so yeah, he was just so calm and just whipped it out. He was amazing.
I think the amount of
they,
memes that have gone around for
I know.
all of the Olympic performers is pretty amazing.
oh, totally.
So when Ben and Andy, when you go out, do you always have your sketchbooks with you? Do you kind of have that expectation of something may inspire you?
Yeah, I always try to have at least one sketchbook on me. Often I'll have one in my back pocket. If I have a bag with me, typically um, typically do.
Mm-hmm.
Always just kind of doodling, see where those doodles might take me.
Me too. I have several different bags. From let's see if I have one close by. All sorts of different. Yeah. Whenever I see a cool bag at a store, I'll buy it, and then I'll fill it with different pencils. So I have them in different sizes, from like medium size and big bags down to like little small bags that I can slip in my pocket, and all sorts of pens of different sizes and pencil kits that make it easy to like throw pencils into a bag without breaking them. And yeah, so that I always have something no matter where I am.
All right, you got to tweet the pommel horse to the pommel horse guy.
Yes, please someone do that.
Do the what with the pommel horse guy? I missed that.
Oh, someone needs to take a snapshot of your drawing, Ben,
Oh.
because we want to show it to our pommel horse.
Winner.
Perfect. Yes.
I'm pretty sure I drew the pommel horse wrong. I need to look up a reference image for that one.
But it's close. It's close.
You got the idea, right?
Oh,
So
absolutely. And Andy's, yes, having a narwhal doing a swimming competition, I think is a great way to go.
there we go. Has Baby Mouse done Olympics before?
She do Olympics. We didn't do Olympics, but she's had a couple of sporting books. She has an ice skating book, and she has a snowboarding book, which the snowboarding book was a lot of hard research for me because I grew up as a skier. So I felt obliged to try snowboarding, and it is so painful. You just fall on your bum all the time. And so, yeah, I will never be a snowboarder. But and then Squish has a soccer. He has a soccer book. So
So it sounds like sports feeds a lot of ideas for all three of you.
yeah, I mean, I think growing up, we all played, I played softball when I was in elementary school, which mainly consisted of me sitting in right field and picking clovers. So, and then when I was in high school, I played lacrosse, and I played it in college and after college. That was probably my most real sport, which was super fun. And Matt was a soccer kid, so that was his generation. And my own children are completely unsporty. So it came full circle, I guess, sort of in a weird way.
I don't think of myself as like a huge sports person outside of basketball, but I was a very competitive sort of kid. And that's made into my Tater Tale series quite a bit. It's the love for games and contests.
Yeah, I was kind of a later in life sports person. Um, it wasn't until I started rock climbing where I found a sport that I really loved. And I think for the first 3 months, I would just go to the gym and I would just like throw myself at the wall and try to like climb up it. And then it wasn't until 3 months later, someone was like, yeah, the climbing the rocks is like a puzzle. You like figure out the best way, the most efficient way to climb it. And I was like, oh, there's like technique. Um, and up till then, I just loved it so much. I would just go and yeah, just kind of fumble around. So yeah, been doing that for a few years now.
I don't think I could do that. I hate heights too much.
I used to be really afraid of heights, and when I rock climb regularly, the fear of heights goes away. And then
Nice.
anytime I take a break, then it like comes back, which I find so fascinating.
Oh, the little jellies are so cute.
Going for a
What's
little
going on there, Ben?
synchronization there.
Very nice.
Although I have a feeling that Narwhal would like improvise during the event, and Jelly would find that very frustrating. It's like, now we're doing this. Wait, what? Struggling to catch up. They seem a little too content with each other right now, or too much on the same page, I think.
All right. Thank you so much, both of you, for giving us a look at just being able to, come to us and show us some of your drawings and sharing the process with us. We really appreciate that. Just to remind people in the audience, if you want a question for one of our creators, definitely throw that into chat. So let's find out what's coming up next. Some of you have talked a little bit about what you are seeing on the horizon, but let's get those confirmed and start with Jenny this time. What's coming up next for you?
So we have we just had Sunny Makes Her Case come out this past spring. And we have the next Sunny book coming out. It's called Sunny Figures It Out. It picks up right after Sunny makes her case, and it's kind of Sunny and her friend Tony. You know, they're in middle school and they like each other. They're boyfriend and girlfriend, but Sunny and Tony are kind of under a lot of pressure to do the boyfriend girlfriend thing, like have him carry her books and have her wear his, varsity, his sports, like his letter coat and all of that stuff. So kind of trying to navigate that, like the romantic pitfalls. But and then the parallel story in it is that her mom ends up getting a job because they need to pay for air conditioning. And so, that whole thing that went on in the 70s when moms, went back to work and what that was like on the family. So that's coming up next.
Great. Ben?
So Andy and I have Paint with Ploof coming out in October, which really happy with how that one turned out, especially all the bright colors on with Ploof. It just feels right. And then Papilio, which we talked about, that'll be coming out in the spring. I just finished a picture book featuring Jelly, called This Book is Dangerous. And it kind of is a bit of an homage to the monster at the end of this book. Pits the reader against Jelly. And Narwhal makes an appearance too. Be making a couple more within that realm, and I'm working on another Tater Tales book currently, the third in that series, about mutant potatoes and their competitions. Would be the sneakiest in the world, which I'm not very sneaky, and Rot has a very similar experience of trying to do something that's not particularly great at. And then also working on a book called Aquamanatee.
That's a
Aquaman's
great
new
title.
sidekick.
Wonderful. Andy, how about you?
Yeah, so let's see. Besides Ploof and Papilio, also have the sequel to Search for a Giant Squid. It's called Search for a Mysterious Mushroom, the second book in the Science Explorer series. And you'll get to travel to 3 different national parks around the world, and you're looking for a specific mushroom called M. spinosissima. That's really hard to find because it's very tiny. And you'll get to learn about how to identify mushrooms from their visible morphology and also through DNA sequencing. Should be really fun. And then another book that I have coming, probably not next year, but the year after, is called My Strange Friend. And it is by Jenny Torres Sanchez. And it's, I think the full title is My Strange Friend, a lullaby about grief. And it's like a poetic story about grief and then becoming like friends with grief, and kind of making peace with it, and kind of welcoming it into your life.
Wonderful. Jen mentioned in chat that as a mom of a child with a developmental disability, she wants you to know that your books have helped her child's comprehension retention through the illustrations. And I think that that is, really speaks to how books with the illustrations and creating illustrations really kind of expand the knowledge. And it's not just entertainment. It is, education, and really can help people who just don't absorb books in a neurotypical way. So thank you for that comment, Jen, for sure. And then I always like to ask my authors, what are you reading right now? Andy, why don't you go first?
Let's see. I am reading a graphic novel called Rutabaga the Adventure Chef. It's a little bit of an older title, but it's this like kind of fantasy-based graphic novel about this chef who goes on adventures in this kind of like Dungeons and Dragons world. And he like fights dragons and monsters and, goes on quests, but it's all centered around him trying to find ingredients to cook different dishes.
Terrific. Ben?
Andy got me onto Moomins recently. So that's one of the areas I've been spending some time. Also, I'm catching up on some Brandon Sanderson books that I hadn't gotten to yet. Always
Terrific.
love diving into those worlds of his.
Absolutely. Jenny, how about you?
This is always the worst question for me. It really is. I am an avid romance reader. I'll show you my office. That's a cover from a Silhouette romance in the 80s. The
Love it.
original art, actually. So I'm reading some very scandalous vampire book. It's
Okay,
very racy.
awesome. We love that too. Well, Ben, Andy, and Jenny, thank you so much for joining me and everybody else here to kind of talk about your books, illustrations, and how much joy that your work brings to the world. So thank you for joining us, and I will turn it back over to Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you all for being here. This was a wonderful conversation. I loved looking at your creative process, Ben and Andy. That was so fun. Jenny, I loved all your suggestions too. So it was so great to see people giving ideas of what you should draw. So thank you all again for being here. It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation, and we were so happy to have you.
Well, thanks so much. Have a good rest of summer.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for having
Bye.
us.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.